Some trading card gamers believe that today's TCG experience has lost the magic that it once had decades ago. But one French studio, Equinox, is setting out to alter that. With a focus on modernization, optimism, and inclusion, and a desire to rekindle the lost wonder of discovering cards and strategies you've never seen before, the Altered TCG project began, and now it's ready to launch beyond the gates. While there are many innovative new ideas being utilized within Altered's app and QR code system, we'll leave that information for another video so we can instead focus on the question that matters most to gamers. How does it play? I'm Dan with Main Deck, and this is the ultimate how to play Altered TCG. Let's start with the basics. Altered TCG is a head-to-head competitive TCG, but unlike most TCGs, it doesn't utilize a system of combat. Instead, in each game, players will be competing in a race to explore the unfamiliar land of Esgartha, a land created from a cataclysm that brought together our reality and the world of our stories and imagination. The land you will be exploring is represented by this line of cards in between the players. Players will begin the game with a marker representing their hero on one side and their hero's companion on the other. And the goal of the game is to lead two different expeditions to make your hero and companion meet somewhere on the map before your opponent can do the same with theirs. Each player will need to bring their own 39 card deck, built using cards of one of the 6 factions, plus a hero card of the matching faction. Let's first talk about the 6 factions you can build your deck around in Altered. Axiom. The Axiom faction are the faction of engineers and inventors. Their gameplay focuses on building permanent cards to create a machine to generate advantage over time. Axiom are potent when their constructions come together, but a machine with a missing bolt has a chance to fall apart. Bravos. The Bravos are adventurers and athletes. Their strategy is to come out strong and fast with high stats but short wicks, burning with a brilliant flame early but sputtering out if the game goes too long. Lyra. The Lyra represent artists, gamblers, and free spirits whose strategy revolves around the chaos of rolling dice and twisting rules to their advantage. Sometimes the payoff is big, and other times you'll come up short. Muna. The Druidic Muna are the defenders of nature, and their conservation efforts come through in their strategy. With a focus on growing stats and keeping characters in play, they can be tough as bark to overcome, but have little interest in disrupting their opponents. Ortis. The lawkeepers and bureaucrats of the Ortis faction are strong at mobilizing recruits to build an army of support quickly, and creating rules to disrupt your opponents. Building armies requires resources though, and their bureaucracy and recruitment can be inefficient compared to other factions. Izmir. Alchemists, wizards, and the magically inclined will flock to the Izmir faction, who specialize in forbidden magics that disrupt the opponent and draw cards. With the right answers and good choices, the Izmir player can control the game until they can take it over, but will be vulnerable to fast or unpredictable strategies. Your hero card will be a core part of your deck's identity, representing a hero from our reality and their companion from the imaginary. Your markers will represent these two on the board, and their card will provide abilities that dictate your deck's strengths and strategies. In the first set, Beyond the Gates, you'll find 3 distinct leader cards for each faction that you can build around, with more to come in the future. The rest of your 39 card deck will consist of characters, spells, and permanents that will help you in your expedition, following the following deck building rules. No more than 3 copies of any card name can be in the deck, regardless of rarity. No more than 15 rare cards can be used in the deck. And no more than 3 unique rarity cards can be used in the deck. And finally, all cards must match your hero's faction. Lastly, some dice or markers that come in the starter deck will be useful when playing. Now with the basics under your belt, we can explain the components of each card so you can properly read them. First, let's start with your hero card. Heroes are what you'll build your deck around, so they have stats and abilities that will be critical for your gameplay. First, before we get any further, you'll notice that every single card has a QR code in the corner. While we won't go into detail here, if you are new to Altered, you'll want to make sure you set up an account on altered.gg or download the Altered TCG app so that you can scan any cards you pick up and add them to your digital collection right away. During gameplay, this QR code can be scanned to read cards in your own language if needed, and in events, scanning codes will be used by judges to check your deck's legality. Up at the top of the card, we have the card title, and underneath, the type line, indicating the faction our hero belongs to, also seen in the faction icon right here. To the left of the faction icon, you'll see a number of card shapes representing the number of cards this hero can have in reserve. Similarly, to the right, the number of card shapes indicates how many landmarks this hero can have in play. This hero has 2 for each, so during gameplay she can have up to 2 cards in reserve and up to 2 landmarks in play at the end of each round. We'll discuss what that means in a little bit. Finally, the hero's text box dictates her abilities. These are always active in each game, so make sure you are utilizing your hero's abilities to your advantage. Some heroes will have the exhaust icon in their ability. This means to turn the card sideways. Having to exhaust means this ability can only be used once until the hero becomes readied again, usually at the start of the next round. Characters are essential to supporting your expedition, so let's look at those next. As with heroes, we have the card title right here, then the type line, which indicates the character type and any subtypes they might have. To the right, you'll see the faction icon, indicating that this character is from the Bravos faction. Also, as before, we have the QR code present on each card down in the corner. The upper left corner of the card has 2 costs. The upper left cost in the blue orb is the hand cost, the amount of mana it takes to play this card from your hand. While the lower right cost in the character's faction color is the reserve cost, the amount of mana it takes to play this card from your reserve, something which, again, we'll talk about in a bit. Now, here's a critical part of every character, their statistics. Characters will have statistics in the 3 different region types, forest, mountain, and water. These statistics show you which regions this character is most adept at helping your hero or companion traverse, and are thus critical to achieving your goal in the game of traversing the Tumult cards. When you play a character card, you'll pay its cost based on where you're playing it from, and then you'll choose which expedition, hero, or companion to play it to. While it is in that expedition, it will provide its stats to support the corresponding hero or companion's ability to travel forward that round. We will go through a full breakdown of this system shortly. Down here, you'll see the card's abilities. In addition to static abilities, you'll see abilities called triggers, like this one, tied to different ways the character can be played. The symbol on the left indicates the type of play that will trigger this ability. Here are the triggers you'll see in Beyond the Gates. This symbol indicates the ability triggers when this card is played from anywhere. This symbol indicates the ability triggers only when this card is played from its owner's hand. This symbol indicates the ability triggers only when this card is played from the reserve. This means that Sun Wukong receives his trigger to gain 2 boosts only when he's played from reserve. Boosts are a marker that indicate that this character has +1 to each of their statistics, so when he's played from reserve, Sun Wukong actually becomes a 4/6/4 in the 3 stats. There are some other markers and abilities to know, but we'll talk about those later in the video. Sometimes there will be an additional colored box at the bottom, like you can see on this Izmir card, Studious Disciple. This is called a support ability, which is used when the card is in your reserve, and this X icon indicates that you can discard this from your reserve to use this effect. We'll talk about the timing for that in a little bit. Now, on to spell cards. Spell cards are one-shot effects that will complete their text and then go away. Just like characters, spells will have a card title and a type, with any subtypes here as well. On the right side is the faction icon, and on the left side are the hand cost and the reserve cost. The QR code is here, and the abilities of the card are here. When you play a spell from your hand, carry out its effects, and unless otherwise noted, send it to your reserve. Finally, let's look at landmarks, the permanent type cards we're seeing in Beyond the Gates. Landmarks have a slightly different layout, with their card title down here and type and subtypes below that. The faction symbol is still up here, along with the hand cost and reserve costs. And the QR code is here. The landmarks' abilities are here, and much like character cards, landmarks will enter play, so they can also have any of the 3 triggers explained previously. Brassbug Hive has both a when played from anywhere trigger and a static at noon trigger. Landmarks are special in that they enter your landmark zone, not either expedition. Landmarks will stay in play in the landmark zone until some other effect removes them, hence the permanent name, or until you have exceeded your hero's landmark count and are forced to discard some at the end of the round. With the card anatomy explained, it's time to take a look at the game board. Here we have the board for a typical 2-player game of Altered, though multiplayer rules are in development as well. As mentioned, dividing both players' side is the expedition track, with the hero region on one side and the companion region on the other, and between them, the 3 face-down Tumult cards. Each Tumult card actually has 2 regions on it, with different permutations of the 3 region types split between them, and each game uses these same 3 cards, shuffled and redistributed face down. Only one player needs to bring these out, or your event venue may also bring some for you. Underneath that, players will place their hero in the center, and on either side of the hero, their 2 expeditions will reside. Expeditions are where you will play your characters to, and they correspond to the hero and companion who they'll be helping guide on their journey. There is no limit to the number of characters that can be in an expedition at once. At the bottom of your play area, you'll have your deck and your discard pile. When cards get discarded, they are sent to your discard pile. Next to the deck is your mana zone, where cards from your hand will be placed face down to be used as mana orbs that game. Mana orbs are exhausted to pay for costs to play cards. Now, in the middle of those, players have room for their reserve and landmarks. You'll recall that your hero card had size limits for each of these, but those limits actually only take place at the end phase of the round. You will commonly exceed the limit of reserve and, depending on the deck, landmarks, and that's okay, but at the end of each round you must discard down to your limit. Now, it's about time we finally talk about what this reserve thing really is. In most games, you only play cards from your hand, but in Altered, you have 2 zones you can play cards from: your hand or your reserve. Your reserve usually consists of cards that you've previously played because, unlike most TCGs, at the end of each round, your characters in your expeditions will all be sent to the reserve. Additionally, after a spell is played, by default it will go to your reserve. Cards in your reserve are not in play. They are waiting, able to be played again for the reserve cost, or discarded to use a support ability. Playing a card from reserve works the same as playing it from hand, except you pay its reserve cost, and most importantly, any character or spell played from reserve gains the fleeting ability, which you can note with a fleeting marker in the case of a character. While I did say that normally a character will go to reserve at the end of the round, and normally a spell goes to reserve after its abilities have been used, fleeting is the major exception. If something with fleeting would be sent to reserve, it is discarded instead. What this means is that usually the reserve will give you 1 extra opportunity to play anything, but it will become discarded afterwards, not sent back to reserve. However, note that landmarks, which go to the permanent landmark zone, will not gain fleeting when played from reserve. With the cards and board explained, let's go through the process of setting up a game, and then talk about the phases of each round. The game begins by randomizing the 3 tumult cards and placing them face down between each player. On either side, place the hero region card and the companion region card. Each player then takes their hero marker and companion marker and places them in the corresponding region on either side of the tumult cards. Place your hero card on your side at the center of the 2 expeditions, and then randomly determine who will begin with the first player marker. Next, after ensuring all your token cards that have a different card back are removed, shuffle your deck and begin by drawing a 6-card hand, and choosing 3 of them to place face down in your mana zone as mana orbs. There are no mulligans or redrawing your opening hand in Altered, so be sure to build your deck with enough cards to play with your first 3 resources. Now with your 3 mana orbs and 3-card opening hand, you are ready to begin the first round. In Altered, each round's phases are named after the different parts of the day, so we'll refer to rounds as days from now on. During each day, both players are active in every phase because Altered uses an alternating action shared round system. The first phase of the day is morning. On the first day of the game, morning is skipped, but normally the following events occur. Change the owner of the first player marker. Each player readies all of their mana orbs and other exhausted cards. Each player draws 2 cards. Beginning with the new starting player, each player may place up to 1 card from their hand face down into their mana orbs. The next phase is noon. Noon is simply a phase where certain effects will trigger if they say at noon. Not every deck has these cards, but some do. Phase 3 is the afternoon. Afternoon is where the bulk of your gameplay takes place. During afternoon, starting with the player with the first player marker, both players will take turns playing 1 card at a time. Each time it's your turn during the afternoon, you can do the following in this order. First, you may take as many quick actions as you like. Then, you must either play a card or pass. In Altered, once you pass, you can no longer take turns for the rest of the day, so make sure you only pass once you've played all of the cards and taken all of the quick actions that you want to. The quick actions that you can take at the start of each turn are any of the following. Using exhaust abilities, such as those on permanent or hero cards. Exhaust the card to use the effect. Or using support abilities of cards that are in your reserve. Discard the card from your reserve to use the ability. When it's your turn to play a card, choose a card to play from your hand or reserve and pay the appropriate cost by exhausting that many mana orbs. If it was a character, choose if you want it to be placed in your hero expedition or your companion expedition, and then place it there. If it was a spell, resolve its abilities, and then send it to your reserve, or discard it if it has fleeting. If it was a landmark, place it in your landmark zone. Remember, you can exceed your hero's landmark capacity, but you must discard down to the capacity at the end of the turn. Turns will continue back and forth as long as players have cards to play, but once both players have passed, the afternoon ends, and we move on to dusk. Dusk is the phase where we check to see how our hero and companion are progressing. It's time to explain how the expeditions work. At the dusk phase, start with one expedition, hero or companion, and check to see where your and your opponent's corresponding markers are sitting. It doesn't matter which one you start with, so in our example, we'll start with the hero expedition. Here, the Bravos hero Kojo is on a region with a forest and mountain terrain, while his Izmir opponent, Akisha, is on a region with just water terrain. Now let's take a look at the stats of the expeditions supporting our heroes. Kojo's Bravos Pathfinder has a 0 in the forest stat, but 3 in both mountain and water, and his Haven trainee has 3 in forest, but just 1 in mountain and water. That gives him a total of 3 in forest, 4 in mountain, and 4 in water. Akisha's total adds up to 4 in forest, 3 in mountain, and 5 in water. So what happens? A player will advance in the expedition if they have a higher value in any one of the region types that their marker is occupying than the opponent has in those types in that expedition. So in this case, Kojo will advance if he beats his opponent in either forest or mountain, while Akisha will advance if she beats Kojo in specifically water. Looking at the results, Akisha beat Kojo in forest, but Kojo did win in mountain, and Akisha did win in water. Since both accomplished their goal, both heroes will advance in the hero expedition this turn. And it looks like Akisha has advanced to a new Tumult card, so that will be revealed to show the new region she is in. Now, let's move on to the companion expedition. Here, Akisha's companion Taru is on a forest and water space, while Kojo's companion Buddha is on the starting space, which has all 3 region types, forest, mountain, and water. The Katagiran Alchemist gives Taru 3 in all 3 region types, but Buddha's Haven trainee beats it in forest by 2 with its 5/3/3 stats, thanks to its 2 boosts. Taru needs to win on forest or water to advance, but unfortunately Buddha is winning in forest and tied in water. Buddha advances by winning on any of the 3, so even though Taru tied in mountain and water, the victory in forest will allow Buddha to finally advance out of the starting region, and next turn, both companions will be competing over the same stats. As you can see, it's possible for both players to advance up to twice, once on each side, each day. It's also possible to prevent your opponent from advancing on a side and advance yourself, or for both players to totally block the other. It all depends on how you play your cards. Now, after comparing both expeditions, at this point if either player has advanced their hero and companion markers to the point where they either met or passed each other, that player wins the game. It's also possible for both players to achieve this in the same turn. In that case, if either player managed to move an extra space and pass their markers rather than meeting them, that player wins. If it's a true tie, then players will continue playing another day, but with special rules. When this happens, the companion starting region is flipped to the arena side and placed in the middle of the board, and all markers are placed on it. Both players play an additional day where all stats on both expeditions are added together. In order to win this tied game now, one player must win in more statistics than their opponent, adding both regions together. In the rare event of another tie, continue playing arena days until one player wins. Also note that during an arena tiebreaker, effects which would move hero or companion markers no longer work. Now back to the turn. If at the end of the dusk step no player has yet won the game, we'll continue on with the final phase of the day, which is night. At the start of the night phase is the rest step. We will let all of our characters rest by sending all of them to the reserve. Don't forget that characters with fleeting will be discarded instead. Then the cleanup step is performed. Both players check to see if their reserve or landmarks are over their hero's capacity, and if so, they discard cards in reserve or landmarks until they have met each capacity. With the night completed, it is the dawn of a new day. Both players start another round beginning with morning and continue to play until one player has become victorious. Now that you understand all the basic rules, let's go over a few extra mechanisms that will quickly come up in your games of Altered. Targeting. Card text will often say target character or target permanent, etc. This means to choose a card that matches that type in play to apply that effect to. Unless an effect explicitly mentions another zone, cards of these types can only be targeted while they're in play, and cards in your hand, deck, discard pile, and in your reserve are not considered in play. Anchored. When a character becomes anchored, place an anchored marker on it. At the rest step of the night phase, instead of sending that character to reserve, remove the anchored marker and it remains in play through the next day. A character with both an anchored marker and a fleeting marker will lose the anchored during rest, but keep the fleeting marker into the next turn. Resupply. When a card instructs you to resupply, take the top card of your deck and place it in your reserve. Don't forget that cards can be played out of reserve the same turn they enter it. Sabotage. Sabotage effects let you discard cards in your opponent's reserve. This can be really powerful and is a big reason you might want to go first in some rounds. Running out of cards. If you run out of cards in your deck, commonly referred to as mill by some experienced TCG players, you do not lose the game. Instead, if you need to draw one or more cards from an empty deck, shuffle your discard pile to become your new deck, draw as needed, and continue playing. There is no penalty for running out of cards. Token cards. Some effects will create token cards that act like regular cards. Tokens can be anything. There are official tokens included in starter decks and packs that you can use, which have distinct card backs so you don't shuffle them in. But you also can use coins, dice, or even a shoe to represent a token so long as both players understand what it represents. If a token would leave play, remove it from the game instead of sending it anywhere else. Card rarities. As I mentioned at the start, cards come in common, rare, and unique rarities in Altered. Beyond the Gates includes 162 common cards, and each common card comes in 2 rare versions as well. Those 2 rare versions of each common are split between a powered-up version of the common and a version of the common shifted to another faction. Because your deck can only contain 15 rares and they share the same name as the commons, you'll have to make decisions about which cards you want to run rare versions of instead of commons. Furthermore, unique cards in Altered are truly special. Every character card also comes in countless unique versions, which are literally unique. If you open a unique card in a booster pack and scan it in the app, you are now the only person in the world who owns that card. Uniques are algorithmically generated to be impressive, but not game-breaking, and each deck may only include up to 3 uniques. In Beyond the Gates, you'll get these about once every 8 packs, so have fun collecting these truly unique cards and building decks with cards your opponents have never seen before. Alright, by now you should have everything you need to know to start playing, but let's solidify everything by going through a few turns of a sample game. In this sample game, we'll be playing the Muna faction, and our opponent will be Ortis. We'll begin the game by randomizing the Tumult cards and placing our hero and companion markers on either side. Our hero cards will go here. We're playing Teja and Naura, whose ability gives a boost to the first character we play each afternoon. Our opponent, playing Sigismar and Wingspan, gets a 1/1/1 Ortis recruit token in their hero expedition each noon. We'll randomly determine who goes first. Looks like it's us. And then we'll each draw 6 cards and choose 3 cards to place face down as mana orbs. Alright, so looking at our opening hand, I think I have a plan. We'll place the Coniferal Cone Man and both Kitsunes as mana orbs. Our opponent also places their 3, and we'll begin the game, skipping the morning phase of the first day. At noon of the first day, Sigismar and Wingspan get a 1/1/1 Ortis recruit token in their hero expedition from their hero ability. Alright, afternoon. We're the starting player, so we begin. Let's start by exhausting 2 mana orbs to play our rare Sneezer Shroom. Sigismar already has presence in the hero expedition, so let's try to avoid that and see if we can win Companion this turn. We'll play the Sneezer Shroom there. Sneezer Shroom has a when played from anywhere ability that anchors it, and our hero also gives our first character each turn a boost, so we've got a 2/2/2 character that will stay in play at the end of the turn. Not bad. Our opponent exhausts 2 mana orbs to play Frog Prince, a 3/0/3 to the Companion expedition. Looking at our companion's positions, both of us can advance by winning on any of the 3 stats. Unfortunately, we can no longer stop our opponent from winning on water, but we can still set up to have a cool turn next turn. For our play, we'll exhaust 1 orb to play Spindle Harvesters, also to the Companion expedition. Just like Sneezer Shroom, when played from anywhere, they become anchored. Our opponent then chooses to pass, and on our turn, we have nothing else to do, so we will choose to pass as well. At dusk, we compare the expeditions. Let's start with Hero because it's very easy. Ortis has 1/1/1, and we have nothing. Because Ortis needed to win on any stat, they advance, revealing the first Tumult card. On the companion side, our Shroom and Harvesters add up to 322, while our opponent has a total of 303. Once again, we both advance by winning any one of the 3 stats, so while we win on Mountain 2-0, they also win on Water 3-2, so both companions advance, revealing the Tumult card on that side as well. Now on to the Night phase. In the Rest step, all characters rest. This sends the Frog Prince to our opponent's reserve, and since the Recruit is a token, it is removed from the game. On our side, both of our characters were anchored, so they simply lose their anchored markers and stay in play. At cleanup, nobody has too many cards in reserve or landmarks, so we move on to the next day. At the start of day 2, the first player marker passes to our opponent. We'll ready all of our mana orbs and then draw 2 cards. We can now place one of these down as a mana orb, and it's usually not great to skip doing that this early, so let's put down this Daughter of Yggdrasil. Our opponent places one as well. Alright, now to noon. And there are 2 effects this time. Our opponent creates their Ortis Recruit in the Hero Expedition from their hero's ability, and our rare Sneaser Shroom gets a boost. He's starting to look pretty solid. On to afternoon, and our opponent is the starting player this time. Our opponent begins by playing their rare Monolith Rune Scribe to the Hero Expedition, probably afraid of our Shroom. It has, when played from hand, if you control a token, resupply. They do have a token, so they get a random card from the top of their deck to their reserve, and it looks like they get an Ortis Cadets. It's our turn now, and we'll exhaust 2 mana orbs to play this Kitsune to the Hero Expedition. When played from hand, both players get to draw a card, so we'll see what we get. We draw a Muna Druid. Unfortunately, it costs 3 to play from hand, so not super useful right now, but because of our hero, our Kitsune also gets a boost. On our opponent's turn, they choose to play the Frog Prince out of their reserve to the Hero Expedition, not wanting to pass in their turn, and perhaps afraid that we'll have something else to play there. Since it was played from reserve, the Frog Prince gets a fleeting marker. We'll play a spell for our turn now, playing Meditation Training and targeting our Sneaser Shroom. Since it has a hand cost of 2, it becomes anchored again, and our Meditation Training goes into our reserve since it was played from hand and does not have fleeting. Out of mana, our opponent passes, and then on our turn, we pass as well and move on to Dusk. At Dusk, we compare stats, and we'll start with Hero again. On the Hero side, we can still advance by winning on any of the 3 stats, while our opponent needs to win on Forest or Mountain. Our opponent stacked their characters there, giving them a total of 5 in Forest, 3 in Mountain, and 6 in Water. We actually beat them on Mountain, but they still win on Forest, so both of us advance this time. On the Companion side, we fare a lot better. They didn't try it all this time, so we win 4-3-3 to 0-0-0 and advance. However, next turn we need exclusively Mountain power to win on that side. At the Night phase, the Rest step begins and we send our characters to bed. Our Spindle Harvesters go to reserve, but our Sneaser Shroom was anchored again, so it just loses its anchored marker. Our Kitsune also gets sent to reserve. On our opponent's side, their Monolith Rune Scribe joins the Cadets in reserve, while the Frog Prince was fleeting, so it is discarded instead. Once again, the Recruit token is removed from the game. In the cleanup step, we actually have too many cards in reserve now, so let's choose to discard the Spindle Harvesters, so we're back at our capacity of 2. With that finished, we'll move on to the 3rd day. In the 3rd day's morning, we receive the start player marker again, we'll ready all of our mana orbs, and both players draw 2 cards. Now, to play a mana orb, let's put the Spindle Harvesters into our mana orb, but feel free to leave a comment with what card you would have put in. Our opponent also puts a card in mana, and we'll move on to noon. At noon, like always, our opponent gets a Recruit token, and our Sneaser Shroom is still growing, now up to a 4/4/4 and still holding down the Companion side. The afternoon begins with us starting again. This time, we'll begin by playing our Muna Druid from hand to the Hero Expedition. Because of our hero, he'll get a boost and be 4/3/3. Our opponent exhausts 3 mana to then play the Ortis Spy from hand to the Hero Expedition, and it has a, when played from hand, Sabotage. They get to choose any card in our reserve to discard, and they choose our Meditation Training. I'm sure they're tired of the Sneaser Shroom growing and don't want it to happen again. For our next play, let's take advantage of our reserve and play the Kitsune again to the Hero Expedition. But this time, it does not get its effect to draw cards because that effect was only when played from hand. This should make it pretty hard for them to win on Water here, which is the one type they need to win to advance. Unfortunately, our opponent had another Frog Prince, and they play him to the Hero Expedition once more. We're all out of mana, so let's pass and see the results at Dusk. Our opponent passes as well, and we move on. At Dusk, we'll start with the Companion Expedition this time because it's very easy. We win again. We advance and reveal the final Tumult card. And moving on to the hero side, we needed Forest or Mountain to advance, and we lose Forest 4-6, but we take Mountain 6-3. Our opponent needed Water to advance, and unfortunately they beat us by 1 with that Frog Prince, 6-5, so both of us advance on that side this turn. Moving on to the night phase, the rest step sees our Sneezer Shroom finally taking a nap, and our Druid joins him in reserve as well. Our Kitsune was fleeting as it was played from reserve, so it gets discarded instead. Our opponent's Frog Prince and Ortis Spy both go to reserve while their token gets removed. This time, it's our opponent that has some cleanup to do, and they discard 2 cards to get down to their 2 reserve capacity. With the round over, let's move on to the 4th day. At the morning of the 4th day, the start player marker passes back to our opponent, we'll ready all of our mana orbs, and we each draw 2 new cards. Our opponent also puts down an orb, and this time, we'll choose to put down Inari as a mana orb, bringing us to 6. At noon, Sigismar's ability triggers once again to get that pesky recruit in the hero expedition. On to afternoon, and our opponent is the starting player this time. Our opponent considers their play for a moment, and then decides to play the Ortis Cadets from reserve on the companion side. This time, we'll play our Daughter of Yggdrasil, and because she's not as good at water, we'll play her to the companion side. Our hero's ability also gives her a boost. Let's see them fight that! However, when she enters, she does give the opponent a draw as a trade for her huge stats. Our opponent exhausts 2 more to play their Ortis Spy from reserve. She doesn't sabotage when played from reserve, but does have a reduced cost. On our turn, we'll use our first quick action before our card play. We'll discard Muna Druid from reserve to use his support ability and anchor our Daughter of Yggdrasil. Now there's some value. Then for our card play this turn, we'll play our Sneezer Shroom from reserve, who will come in with Fleeting, but his ability will also give him Anchored. Our opponent reveals their plot at last by playing a Charge spell from hand. This boosts all of their characters, devastating us this turn. On our turn, we'd love to cast Nurture, but we are 1 mana short. I guess we'll just have to pass here and see what happens. Our opponent passes as well, and we move to Dusk. We're not happy about it, but they beat us across the board. 2-2-2 to 1-1-1 on the hero side, and 7-7-6 to 6-6-4 on the companion side. These region types don't even matter with such a decisive victory, advancing them once on each side and us on neither. I wonder what would have happened if we had instead waited to play the Daughter, rather than showing them where we're going to be the strongest. No one has yet won the game, so we'll move on to night and clean up the board. Our Sneezer Shroom loses its Anchored token, but keeps its Fleeting for the next turn, and our Daughter loses its Anchored token. Thankfully, our opponent's entire board had Fleeting tokens, so they all become discarded, and they've only got their hand to work with in the next turn. However, with just a single advancement next turn, the game could be theirs, where we need to win on both sides to join our hero and companion and take the win. So, really, it's anybody's game. At this point, we'll end the demo here, but feel free to comment below with who you think would win if we continued to play out the rest of the game. Hopefully this video has given you everything you need to know to start playing Altered TCG. But like any TCG, the rules can get complicated, so if there's anything I missed or anything you need clarified, go ahead and leave a comment down below and I'll answer any questions that you guys ask. Pinned in the comments, I'll actually have an FAQ post answering the most commonly asked rules questions, and if you also want to learn more about the QR code and app side of things, there will be a video at the end you can click on to get that information as well. I hope you all found that helpful, and if you did, please feel free to leave a like and a friendly comment down below, and feel free to hit that subscribe button if you want to catch more Altered TCG content, because we will have a lot more coming. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.